Okay, we are talking about parallel, intersecting, and skew lines. Let's start off with some parallel lines. Here's an example of parallel lines. Parallel lines go in the exact same direction. Here are another pair of parallel lines. Here are another pair of parallel lines. They're going straight up, so they're parallel to each other. But they may be going not straight up, but over. And as long as they're going in the same direction, they are parallel. Here's another pair of parallel lines. Notice that this one is on the top left of the rectangular prism, and the other one, line BC, is on the bottom right of the rectangular prism. But they're still going in the exact same direction, so they're parallel to each other. So what is the real definition of parallel lines? The geometric definition: parallel lines lie in the same plane and do not intersect. Now, most of us already know that parallel lines do not intersect, but many of us may have not known that parallel lines lie in the same plane, and they must lie in the same plane. The example here, you see both of these lines, line EF and line HG, both lie on the plane that is on the top of this rectangular prism. Now you may be saying, wait a minute, what about these two lines, lines HE and line BC? I see they're going in the same direction, I see they do not intersect, but what plane do they lie in? Well, I will show you a plane that they both lie in. They are both in this plane. It's a diagonal plane that starts in the bottom right hand side of the rectangular prism and goes up like a ramp to the top left of the rectangular prism. So these two lines, because they're parallel, they do lie in the same plane. And here's one more fancy example for you. Line EG is parallel to line DB. Let's move on to intersecting lines. Here are two lines that intersect, line HE and line HA. They both intersect at point H. Here are two lines that intersect at what point? Where do they meet? They meet at point C. Line DC and line FC also meet at point C. I could also have line BC and line DC. They intersect at point C. In fact, all three of those lines intersect at point C. And here's a fancy example for you too. Line EB intersects line AF, and we'll give it a name at that point of intersection. We'll call that intersection M. Okay, skew lines. This one's probably the one you may not be familiar with or you may be struggling with, and I'm going to help you get through this and to understand this. Now, here's the definition. Skew lines are lines that are non-coplanar. It's really that simple. But you're probably thinking, how do I know whether or not they're non-coplanar? I'm going to give you a checklist of 2 items in order to know whether or not you have skew lines. As long as you can check off both of these boxes, then you know they are skew lines. So we have to test it for 2 things. The first box says that they're not parallel. The second box, not intersecting. So let's look at an example. Line GF and line AB, the 2 highlighted lines. The first box there, the check box, says not parallel. Are these not parallel? Correct. They are not parallel. And then we're going to check to see if they are not intersecting. Are they not intersecting? Correct. They're not intersecting. So therefore they are skew lines. Let's look at another example. These 2 lines. Do the 2 checklist boxes here. First check box says not parallel. Can we say that those are not parallel? Check. How about the next box? Not intersecting? Check. They are not intersecting. Even though the lines on the screen do cross each other, the line ED is on the back of the prism and line FG is on the front of the prism, and in three-dimensional space they don't actually intersect or share any points. So again, it's just whether or not you can check off these two boxes. That's how you know you have skew lines. And here's one more example for you. Line HG and line FB. And we can check off both of those boxes. We can say that they're not parallel and they are not intersecting. So therefore they are skew lines. Here are some hand signals we can use in class to signify intersecting, parallel, or skew lines. If you cross your hands like that and they're touching, then you have intersecting lines. If you have both of your arms and hands going in the same direction, they are parallel. And this karate guy, he has his hands so that they are not parallel and not intersecting, so the only other option is skew lines. Notice one of his arms is out in front of him, while his right arm is out behind him. Okay, let's go through and see whether you can get these correct. Intersecting, parallel, or skew. You pick the one of the three that best describes the two lines. Line HE and line GF. Well, first you have to find them. And these two lines are going in the exact same direction. So we write it, line HE is parallel to line GF. We use two parallel lines to notate the word parallel. Find lines AD and line BD. And what are they? They intersect each other. They meet at point D. That is what they share. Okay, intersecting, parallel, or skew. Line HF and line EG. Those crisscross along the top of the rectangular prism, and they will in fact intersect. And we can write it out with the full words. Line HF intersects line EG. Line HF and line CA. Those are parallel, and we signify parallel lines on a diagram by putting these arrows. They kind of look like birds on a wire, so I often call them birds on a wire. Line HF and line BD. Let's go through the checklist. First of all, are they intersecting? No. Are they parallel? No. So the only other option, if they're not intersecting or parallel, is skew. So let's review something about skew lines here. And you can draw this yourself by drawing two squares. I'll show you again. Draw two squares and then connect the vertices that correspond with parallel lines. And look at these two highlighted lines. First, ask yourself if they're intersecting or parallel. If they're not parallel and they're not intersecting, the only other option is skew.